Confidence builds everything you value: the career you grow, the love you keep, the dreams you dare to name, and the loss of it quietly takes those things away. You don't notice at first. One missed opportunity here, one unspoken idea there, a hesitation during a meeting, a silence when someone asks what you really want. But over time, the silence grows louder than your voice. That's how self-doubt works. Not as an explosion, but as slow erosion. I know this because I've lived it. I've watched confidence slip through my hands like water, leaving me clutching at the edges of what I used to be sure about. I've seen doors close that I never even tried to knock on. I've stayed in jobs long after they stopped growing me, in relationships that no longer saw me, all because I didn't believe I could begin again. The truth is, a lack of confidence doesn't just make you small. It reshapes your world until you forget the size of your own voice. It keeps you editing yourself mid-sentence, second-guessing what you know, convincing yourself that maybe this, the half-life of potential, is all you deserve. There's a mirror across my desk. Some nights, I catch my reflection and see the cost of that shrinking. The person staring back doesn't look broken, just uncertain. Eyes still bright but cautious, like someone waiting for permission to exist fully. Confidence, when it fades, doesn't vanish. It hides behind your own hesitation. I think of the moments I let fear make choices for me. The time I didn't apply for the promotion because I told myself they already had someone better. The love I didn't fight for because I assumed I wasn't enough. The creative project I postponed for someday that never came. Each loss carved a quiet line inside me. Lessons I didn't want but needed. It took years to realize that confidence isn't the same as arrogance or constant certainty. It's not about walking into a room and being the loudest voice. It's the quiet belief that you belong there, that your presence has worth before you prove anything. Carl Rogers once said that change begins with honesty, and I think this is what he meant. The first act of rebuilding confidence is telling the truth. I've been afraid. I've let doubt decide too much. I've been waiting for life to choose me instead of choosing it back. That truth hurts, but it also frees you, because once you see how much you've lost to self-doubt, opportunities, love, peace of mind, you begin to understand how precious confidence really is. Not the showy kind, but the deep, steady kind that allows you to breathe in your own skin again. So here, at this moment, with the sound of the washing machine in the next room, the faint hiss of the kettle, and a cooling mug beside me, I make a small promise to learn again, to grow again, to rebuild confidence not as a mask, but as a foundation. That means practicing skills that sharpen the mind and steady the heart. It means reading, training, showing up to improve even when no one's watching. It means talking to mentors and friends who remind me who I am when I forget. It means looking in that mirror each morning and saying, not yet perfect, but trying. And that is enough. Confidence isn't given. It's earned through repetition, through showing up one more time than you disappear. It's studying when you'd rather scroll, asking when you'd rather hide, trying again after the last no. If I could speak to the version of myself who lost faith years ago, I'd tell them this. You didn't fail because you lacked talent. You only paused because you stopped believing in your own right to begin. And that belief, that quiet courage, can be rebuilt. Because confidence, once lost, isn't gone forever. It's waiting for you to stop apologizing and start preparing, to learn, to grow, to rise, and to remember that the life you want is still within reach. There's a strange kind of pain that comes when confidence fades. Not the dramatic kind, but the slow, realistic kind that seeps into everyday life. It's the moment you start rehearsing sentences in your head before speaking. The moment you stop volunteering ideas because someone once dismissed you. The way you scroll through other people's success stories and feel smaller, not inspired. It doesn't happen overnight. It's gradual. So gradual, you don't even realize it's happening until one day you can't remember the last time you felt proud of yourself. At first, you tell yourself it's just a rough patch. Everyone feels unsure sometimes. But the weeks turn into months, and the uncertainty becomes a companion. You start to edit yourself in conversations. A softer tone here, a smaller opinion there. You laugh at jokes that don't sit right just to avoid standing out. You wear competence like a costume, one that hides the quiet panic inside. Confidence, when it was strong, used to make life feel like an open road. But now, it feels like you're walking barefoot on gravel, careful, measured, constantly scanning for the next sharp stone. The truth is, lack of confidence doesn't look like failure from the outside. It looks like someone who's always agreeable, someone who smiles politely and says, "No worries, I'm fine." But inside, that person is running calculations. Did I say too much? Did I sound stupid? Should I have stayed quiet? I used to think humility meant shrinking. I thought being modest made me likable, made me safe. But humility without confidence turns into self-erasure. It teaches you to trade your real opinions for peace, your real dreams for approval. And the world doesn't reward silence, it forgets it. At work, it showed up as hesitation. I'd sit in meetings with ideas burning holes in my notebook, but my voice never reached the room. I'd watch others say the same things later and receive praise. Each time it happened, I felt the same sting, not anger, but shame. Shame for not having spoken, for once again betraying my own potential. In relationships, it looked like apologizing for existing too loudly, saying sorry when I hadn't done anything wrong, accepting less than I needed because I didn't believe I was worth more. The absence of confidence is not just emotional, it's practical. It shapes choices, income, friendships, even the way you walk into a room. And yet, here's the honest part. The world won't slow down for your self-doubt. Bills still come, deadlines still approach, people still expect you to function. So you learn to fake confidence, to perform okayness. You wear the mask well enough that even you start to believe it. But deep down, you feel it. The hollow space where self-trust used to live. One night I caught my reflection in the mirror after another long day. It wasn't a breakdown moment, just a realization that I had been living as a version of myself edited for approval. My reflection didn't look sad, it looked tired of pretending. That was the wound, not the absence of success, but the loss of authenticity. Kierkegaard called anxiety the dizziness of freedom. I finally understood that. The fear wasn't of failure, it was of possibility. The terrifying thought that life could be different if I actually believed in myself again. That kind of fear can paralyze you. It keeps you safe, but small. It whispers, don't risk it. Stay where you're comfortable. But comfort, when mixed with doubt, slowly becomes confinement. I started to see that my low confidence wasn't just a personality flaw. It was a skill I had neglected. Like a muscle I'd stopped using, and like any muscle, it weakens when ignored. So I began noticing how it showed up. The slumped shoulders, the downcast eyes, the quick yes when I wanted to say no. Reality doesn't lie. The body reveals what the mind hides. That's when I understood. Confidence isn't built from compliments. It's built from competence, from doing the thing you're afraid of until fear loses its voice. The real world doesn't hand you validation. It gives you chances to earn it. And maybe that's the painful beauty of it. You can't think your way into confidence. You have to act your way into it. One risk, one voice, one honest word at a time. When I look back now, I see that losing confidence wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of self-awareness. The crack that let me see how much of my life had been shaped by hesitation. Confidence won't come back overnight. But every time I tell the truth, even to myself, I feel the floor beneath me solidify again. And that, I've learned, is how real growth begins. Not with loud declarations, but with quiet honesty about where you stand, and the decision to rise from there. It didn't happen in a dramatic scene. There was no breakdown in the middle of a meeting, no shouting or tears. It was just one ordinary Tuesday morning. Emails piling up, unread messages blinking, and that same knot in my stomach that had become a kind of roommate. I was late for work again. Not because of traffic, but because I couldn't decide what to wear. Every outfit felt like someone else's costume. I looked at myself in the mirror and didn't recognize the person staring back. The careful smile, the exhausted eyes. Confidence had once felt natural. Now it felt like an act I couldn't remember the lines for. When I finally got to the office, I sat through another meeting in silence. My manager asked for ideas. I had one, a good one, something I'd been thinking about for weeks. But when I opened my mouth, my throat tightened. The words froze somewhere between thought and sound. Someone else spoke up, said something similar, and everyone nodded. Applause, approval, progress. I just sat there, heart thudding, pretending to take notes. That moment stung more than I expected. Not because someone stole my idea, but because I'd abandoned it first. I'd abandoned myself. Later that day, a coworker asked if I was okay. I said yes, of course. Always yes. But that night, when I got home, the yes turned into something heavier. I poured a cup of coffee, sat at my desk and stared at the mirror again. The same one that had become part of the routine. Except this time, the fog from the kettle covered my reflection, and I felt strangely grateful for it. It was easier not to see. That's when it hit me. I wasn't tired from working too much. I was tired from holding back, from measuring every word, from trying so hard not to make mistakes that I'd stopped making anything at all. I remembered a friend once telling me, "You play small so no one can hurt you." Back then, I thought it was about humility. Now, I realized it was fear. Fear of standing out, of being judged, of wanting too much. Fear disguised as modesty. The next day, that fear cost me again. I missed an opportunity I'd been waiting for. A project I wanted, one that could have changed the direction of my career. My boss said kindly, "I wasn't sure you were interested. You didn't speak up." That one sentence sank deep. You didn't speak up. It was true. I hadn't. Not because I didn't care, but because I didn't believe my voice would matter. That night, the mirror was no longer kind. It reflected the cost of silence. The cost of trying to be invisible so that no one could reject you. Because here's the truth no one tells you. When you make yourself invisible to avoid pain, you also make yourself invisible to opportunity, to growth, to love. I thought about how many times I'd done it. In meetings, in relationships, in conversations that mattered. All the moments I'd swallowed words, shrunk dreams, edited feelings. It wasn't humility. It was fear wearing good manners. And fear, if left unchecked, builds its own quiet prison. In that realization, something cracked. Not in a destructive way, but like light finding a weak spot in the wall. The crack wasn't loud. It was clarity. I could suddenly see the pattern. How low confidence had shaped every corner of my life. The missed promotions, the fading friendships, the quiet distance between who I was and who I could be. It hurt to see it. But pain has a strange honesty. It doesn't lie about where you are. For the first time in a long time, I stopped blaming luck, timing, or other people. I looked at myself in that mirror and said the hardest truth out loud. I am the reason I'm standing still. The words weren't cruel, they were freeing. Because if I was the reason, then I could also be the solution. I stood there, just breathing, feeling the weight of that acceptance. And as the fog on the mirror began to clear, my reflection slowly came back into focus. Not perfect, not polished, just real. That night, I didn't plan a reinvention. I didn't make resolutions. I just made one quiet decision. No more hiding behind fine. Because the moment you stop pretending, the rebuilding can finally begin. And maybe that's how confidence returns. Not all at once, but in the simple courage of saying, "This is me, and I'm not going to disappear anymore." For days after that moment in front of the mirror, something inside me wouldn't settle. It wasn't guilt anymore. It was awakening. That kind of restlessness that comes when you realize you can't keep living the same way, yet you don't fully know what the next step looks like. I started waking earlier, not out of discipline, but because sleep felt too heavy. I'd make coffee, sit in the stillness before sunrise, and listen to my thoughts the way you'd listen to a friend who finally decided to speak. What I heard wasn't pretty. Disappointment, regret, longing, and beneath all of it, a question that scared me more than failure ever had. Who am I when I'm not afraid? That question echoed through my mornings. I'd think of how much time I'd spent chasing approval, building a version of myself that could be accepted in every room. Polite, agreeable, capable, but never too bold. Somewhere along the line, I'd stopped asking what I truly wanted. And yet, as painful as that realization was, it also carried a strange peace. I wasn't the only one. Most people I know are walking around with a quiet war inside, trying to look confident while secretly hoping no one notices how uncertain they feel. It made me more compassionate, both toward others and toward myself. That's when I started reading again, not out of obligation but hunger. Words from people who had walked through darkness and still found meaning. Maslow wrote that real growth begins when safety and honesty meet. I realized I'd been chasing safety without honesty for years, trying to build confidence on comfort instead of truth. It never worked. So I began the slow work of honesty. I started telling myself the truth about my fears, my limits, my hopes. Not in a dramatic way, just small acknowledgments. I'm scared of rejection. I still care about what people think. I want to feel proud of myself again. Each truth felt like removing one heavy stone from my chest. Frankl said that meaning isn't found, it's chosen. I repeated that line like a prayer. It reminded me that I wasn't powerless. I was participating. I couldn't control outcomes, but I could decide how to respond, how to shape what happened to me into something useful. And then there was Rilke, whispering across the decades. Be patient toward all that is unsolved in your heart. His words felt like a hand on my shoulder. I had been rushing to fix myself, to erase doubt as if it were a stain. Rilke taught me that healing wasn't speed, it was depth. That maybe the goal wasn't to get over fear, but to learn how to walk with it without losing direction. In those quiet mornings, the mirror became less of an enemy. I'd sit across from it with my coffee and notice small things. A steadier gaze, a little more breath in my lungs, a softness in how I looked at myself. Confidence wasn't coming back as a roar. It was returning as gentleness. I began to understand that confidence is not performance. It's a relationship with yourself. The more honest that relationship becomes, the steadier you feel in the world. I didn't need to be the loudest, the smartest, or the most polished. I just needed to be sincere, with others, and with myself. There were still hard days, times when self-doubt returned like an old ache. But even then, I noticed something new. I didn't crumble as easily. The fear no longer defined me. It simply reminded me that I was human. Kierkegaard's words came back to me. Anxiety as the dizziness of freedom. Maybe that was the truth. I wasn't broken, just overwhelmed by the wide open space of choice. Freedom is frightening until you learn how to stand in it. So now, when I feel that familiar tremor before speaking up, I remind myself, this is not fear to avoid. This is life asking you to participate. The heart racing, the shaky voice, they're proof that you're awake, that something inside you still wants to grow. Confidence isn't about never doubting again. It's about showing up with the doubt and doing it anyway. That's what all the thinkers were trying to say in their own ways. That meaning isn't a prize for the fearless. It's the light that appears once you stop pretending you're fine and start telling the truth about what matters to you. And maybe, just maybe, that's how quiet confidence is rebuilt. Not through perfection or applause, but through 1,000 small moments of honesty, endured and lived through with courage. The morning after that quiet realization, the mirror still waited. But this time, instead of rushing past it, I stood still. The reflection hadn't changed, yet something inside had. The fear was still there, but now it had company. Resolve. Confidence, I was beginning to learn, doesn't return through one grand epiphany. It comes back through patterns, small, faithful ones that remind you every day, I am showing up for myself again. Move your body in the morning. It started with movement, simple, almost reluctant. A walk around the block before sunrise, the air still cool and forgiving. At first, I did it because I'd read that exercise helps. But after a week, I realized it wasn't about fitness. It was about proof. Each morning I moved, I collected a small piece of evidence that I could keep a promise to myself. When my feet hit the ground, my mind stopped racing. The rhythm of walking became a quiet conversation between fear and courage. Some mornings, I stretched instead, or just breathed by the window. Still, every act whispered the same truth. I'm not stuck. I'm alive and moving forward. Confidence doesn't begin in the mind. It begins in motion. 2. Prepare for the day with intention. After walking, I'd sit with my coffee and plan. Not everything, just 3 important things that mattered most. For years, I had drifted through days reacting to what others needed. Planning gave me back authorship. I began treating each workday like craftsmanship, one deliberate task at a time, done with care. Before meetings, I'd review notes. Before emails, I'd pause and breathe. It wasn't about control, it was about respect. Respect for my time, my work, and the quiet discipline that confidence is built on. There was a peace that came from order, a sense that I was no longer at the mercy of chaos. The more I prepared, the less I doubted. 3. Feed your mind with useful knowledge. When I lost confidence, I stopped learning. I'd scroll instead of study, compare instead of grow. But learning has a strange magic. It pulls you out of fear and into curiosity. So I made a rule: 10 minutes a day of intentional input, a few pages of a book about my field, a podcast on communication, a short video that taught something new. It didn't matter what, only that it fed growth instead of noise. At first, the changes were invisible. Then one day, I caught myself contributing a new idea during a team call. Not rehearsed, just natural. Knowledge had softened anxiety into assurance. Each new skill, each new concept, stitched back a small piece of the self I had doubted. Confidence, I realized, wasn't arrogance. It was familiarity with your own effort. 4. Stay connected with your professional circle. For a long time, I'd pulled away from people. I told myself I was too busy, but really, I was afraid they'd see how uncertain I'd become. Yet isolation is where insecurity thrives, so I reached out to mentors, colleagues, old friends. A message here, a question there. At first it felt awkward, like relearning how to speak, but conversation slowly reminded me of who I was before self-doubt took over. Curious, capable, eager to grow. One mentor said, "Confidence doesn't mean knowing everything. It means being open enough to keep learning." That line stayed with me. It made connection feel less like performance and more like partnership. In sharing ideas, I stopped shrinking. Community didn't just encourage me, it mirrored back the parts of myself I had forgotten. 5. Reflect before you rest. Evening became the anchor of everything. I'd open my notebook and ask 2 simple questions. What did I handle well today? What can I improve tomorrow? The first question taught gratitude. The second taught growth. I wrote honestly, sometimes proud, sometimes frustrated, always real. The act of reflection turned mistakes into teachers and small wins into motivation. Over time, this nightly ritual became my quiet confidence builder. It closed each day not with exhaustion, but with awareness. Proof that I was participating in my own becoming. By the end of each week, something subtle had shifted. My tone steadier, my shoulders straighter, the mirror less intimidating. Confidence hadn't returned as noise or applause. It came back as rhythm. Morning movement, planned purpose, learning, connection, reflection. 5 simple acts that reintroduced me to myself. Because in truth, confidence isn't found in big moments. It's rebuilt in the ordinary ones. The walk before sunrise, the small plan, the open book, the shared conversation, the pen moving across a page. These routines didn't make life perfect. They made it real. And reality, when faced with love and consistency, is where confidence finally decides to stay. The question echoed softly one morning as sunlight spilled across the desk. The same desk where, months earlier, I'd stared at a fogged mirror, unable to meet my own reflection. Now, the mirror stood clear, the coffee warm, and the silence no longer heavy, just peaceful. I wasn't suddenly fearless or flawless. I still hesitated before speaking in meetings. I still overthought my emails, but something inside had shifted. The self-doubt that once spoke like a command had quieted into a whisper, one I could choose to answer or not. Confidence had returned, not as the bold fire I once imagined, but as a steady flame, one that didn't need to impress, only to illuminate. Each habit I built had become a thread in the fabric of who I was becoming. The morning walks reminded me that motion creates momentum. The daily planning taught me that structure isn't rigidity, it's self-respect. The learning reminded me that my mind is still capable of expansion. The conversation showed me that strength grows best in connection. And reflection, that nightly ritual, proved that self-awareness is the quiet parent of self-trust. Together, they stitched a truth I had long forgotten. Confidence isn't an achievement, it's a relationship. One that needs tending, forgiveness, and daily care. There's a moment, after long struggle, when you realize you no longer crave validation. Not because you've become indifferent, but because you finally learned to trust your own rhythm. That's where I found myself. Work felt lighter, not because the tasks changed, but because my energy did. I began to speak more, not louder, just clearer. I gave credit freely, asked for help without apology, and took up space without guilt. In love, too, something softened. I no longer reach for people to fix my worth. I reach for them to share it. That shift, from needing to proving, to simply being, was the quiet revolution I didn't know I was capable of. The mirror, once a symbol of avoidance, had become a companion. Some mornings I'd still catch a trace of old insecurity, a quick thought, a doubtful glance, but now, instead of turning away, I'd smile at it. That version of me wasn't the enemy. It was the one who stayed long enough to heal. Carl Rogers once wrote that people are as beautiful as sunsets if you let them be. For the first time, I understood what he meant. Confidence isn't forcing yourself into brightness. It's allowing your light to appear naturally, without comparison, without rush. And maybe that's what growth really is. Not the elimination of fear, but learning how to live with it kindly. To say, yes, I'm scared, and I'll still show up. One evening, as the city lights blinked on, I wrote a line in my reflection journal. I didn't find confidence. I rebuilt it, quietly. It wasn't a declaration, just a simple record of truth. That night I slept deeply, the kind of rest that comes when you're no longer fighting yourself. The next morning the world looked the same. Traffic, deadlines, messages. But I wasn't the same. My steps carried a steadiness that didn't exist before. Not arrogance, not perfection, just calm certainty that whatever the day held, I could meet it as myself. That was the real victory. Not the promotion, not the applause, but the quiet dignity of returning to my own center, to a self I could trust. Before leaving the house, I caught my reflection one last time. The same mirror, the same light, but this time my gaze didn't flicker. "Let's begin," I whispered. And the day, ordinary, unpredictable, beautifully human, began right there. Because confidence was never about becoming someone new. It was about coming home, to the strength, the softness, and the steady voice that had been waiting inside all along.